What's going? And we going. What's going on, everyone? Hope you're having a wonderful Friday or day at whatever time you're watching. I had a crazy week. Yeah, I'm just looking to chill out, work on my site a little bit, answer some questions about freelancing. Before I do that, I'm showing probably a little too much. I'll leave the camera. I was gonna adjust it because I'm seeing a lot of the back of my screen, but that's okay. We'll live. So, yeah, I'm just going to be answering some questions about freelancing. For those who haven't seen, I announced on Twitter that I am doing a live course on how to freelance as a UI UX designer. I get a lot of questions about freelancing, especially more so now. I've gotten like a huge uptick in people asking me questions about freelancing and what it's like being a freelance designer and what they need to know and about all the little specific things about it. And this month will be my 9th year freelancing full time, which is crazy to think about. I mean, just how long I've been doing design, but then like how long I've been a freelancer, just specifically a freelancer. It's kind of wild to think about. So, yeah, it was really hard for me when I first started freelancing, as for most people, and I've always wanted to help more designers learn how to freelance for many different reasons. But I think the biggest one is that it increases like financial security, and that was the biggest thing for me. I didn't like the idea of a company being able to fire me at any time and not being able to make money until I find my next job. And so to be a little bit more resilient and be able to pick the projects that I wanted to work on, I went freelance, and it was a great decision, and I've really enjoyed it. So yeah, I'm answering questions about freelancing. So feel free to respond in the chat if you have a question. Otherwise, I'm gonna look at some of the questions that I got. I got some people who are like DMs. Don't be shy about asking questions. It's okay to ask in public. Your boss isn't gonna find you. And then yeah, some other questions that I've gotten just like in emails and other things like that. So I'm gonna be just going through those, and if I get any live questions along the way, yeah, I'll look at those as well. So I'm going to just start out with questions, and then if I run out of questions, then I'll just kind of work on my site for a little bit. How's that sound? All right. So this is a good question. I came across, I'm going to drag this over to my other screen. All right. So I come across a lot of contracting gigs that require the contractor to be within a specific time zone. I understand about collaboration, but does a company have a right to ask for a working schedule that overlaps with business hours? This is a really great question. I've worked with companies, so I'm based in America, in the Mountain Time Zone, and I've worked with companies who are based in Europe, and based in some Asian time zones as well. And short answer is you'll want to have some degree of overlap because there is that degree of collaboration. But the way that I would push back on that and the way that I work with companies is that we have a degree of overlap for collaboration, but then I will just kind of work in my own time zone. And so what we'll do is if there is like not a great overlap, they will have like 1 to 2 hours where it's like a time zone overlap where either I'm staying up late or I'm getting up early in order to collaborate with other people. And then the rest of the time I'm working my normal time zone and I'm working my normal hours. And the key to this really working, especially when you're in that phase where you're still like negotiating or you're still kind of feeling each other out for like a working relationship, is to really establish up front that you're over communicating. And so one of the best ways that I've done that to just give regular updates is to use Loom and to just do a recording of like what I've done so far, things that are open questions, things that I need more feedback on or kind of like blockers, and just like communicating on a regular basis in a way that's super easy for them to consume. And companies that were hesitant about not working in the same time zone quickly won over by just over communicating and being very, very clear. So I started doing this before we had Figma, before we could do like live collaboration and people could just pop into the file. But now with Figma, it's even easier to do it. And so you can like, I've done it where we leave sticky notes or leave comments back and forth within the file, and just like I'll tag people and say like, this is my question, comment. Still do the Loom videos, but yeah, it's a really good way to do it. But just in a nutshell, over communicate. Don't get past that and have a little bit of overlapping hours so that you can collaborate, and then focus on your core working hours. Just get your job done. All right. What are my other questions? Let's see. I have a question about how do you find specific research participants when you're just working solo as a consultant, as like a UX generalist? This is a really good question because it's hard for everyone to like gather people for research. And so in this one, they're looking at things like, how do I find people at like early phases of developing a product or like with a startup? So this is it's a very common question. So I was actually working with a couple of cybersecurity startups, and the audience that we had to interview was very, very specific. I really love this technique from the book. I believe it's Talking to Humans, about research. Let me just make sure. Well, let me give my answer and then I'll look it up. But yeah, it uses this technique towards the end of the book about finding participants, where you first look within your network. So like looking on LinkedIn and looking at people just who you think would be good people to interview. And then you starting with that. So with that cybersecurity startup, they have obviously been in the industry for a while. And so they had their connections of people that we can interview. And then once you do those interviews, towards the end, thanking them for their time, and then asking them, based off of what we talked about, is there anyone else you would recommend me talk to? And that's really great because towards the end of the interview, if you've done user interviews, people actually enjoy it much more than they think they will, because people like talking about themselves. And then two, especially like if you've given them an award or like a gift or something like that for doing it, they'll definitely recommend other good people. And then that way you're able to reach out to those people and say like, hey, so-and-so told me to reach out to you to ask you about some questions about, your working process or something like that. Could we set up a time to do that? And getting that name is often the foot in your door, foot in the door to get more interviews like that. And so it's a really great technique. And then you just repeat it from there. So you're able to like, build up a rapport and do that interview, and then ask them again, is there anyone that you would recommend me talking to? And so, yeah. Nielsen Norman said that once you do like 5 interviews, you've probably you have a significant amount of research for a particular like usability problem. And then I found for like competitive research and also just kind of understanding the space and what people are unhappy with other competitor products and like workflows, then like about, I think 10 is probably where I found like you start getting repeating answers. So yeah, that's how I found research participants. It's just kind of working your network and kind of going that way. And then I saw this. Let me look at that book. I got my book notes. Yes. The book that I'm referring to is called Talking to Humans by Giff Constable. Fantastic book for doing customer interviews. Highly recommend it. Oh, got a good question. How do you learn UX design? That's a pretty big question. I mean, UX design is a pretty big field. And so I would recommend, it depends on your time and the amount of money that you can throw at it, and, what you're trying to do in the meantime as well. If you're willing to invest a lot of time and energy, I think the boot camps are a great place to start because they give you the basic idea and flow of how to do UX design. If you don't have the money for those, because they are kind of expensive and they are like very time intensive as well, there's plenty of great courses out there that I think you could dig into as well. So I don't know any off the top of my head, but I would recommend looking at Udemy. There's a great designer, I even follow him on Twitter, who teaches UX design through Udemy and Skillshare courses. I would definitely start there. I think you can follow kind of the things that you're interested in and things that you find fascinating about UX, because it is a big field. And if you're interested in things like, information architecture or doing research or usability or accessibility, there's plenty of different places that you can dive into and start learning more. Yeah, no problem. Let me try to find that designer, because he teaches a really great course. Yeah, I'll see if it pops up, but if not, if I can't find it during the stream, then I will put it in the comments. Yeah, I'm not going to spend too much time on it. All right. If you're joining me, I'm answering questions about freelancing. I'm doing a live cohort-based class on helping designers break into freelancing, and that's launching next week. So I'm answering any questions about the course or about freelancing. And I have a handful of questions that I've collected just from people emailing me and direct messages and things like that. And so I'll work through those. But if you have a question, feel free to ask me in the chat, and I'll get to it. Let's see. Oh, here's a good question that popped up. Yeah, I'll get to your live question and then I'll jump back into this other one. Can you tell me the top 5 opportunity skills in freelancing? Are you saying opportunities or skills? Like, what are the top 5 skills you need to have, or your top 5 like opportunities, or like the biggest opportunities for freelancing? Oh, no worries about your English. No worries. I understand English is a hard language to learn. Um, well, why not? Like while I'm waiting, I will top 5 opportunities. Okay. That's an interesting question. Top 5 opportunities. I think the biggest thing is you have the opportunity to pick and choose the types of projects that you take. Um, I back when I started doing UX design, I was doing a lot of marketing sites and I was doing a lot of information architecture for like big informational websites. And I saw how the industry was kind of splitting between kind of these marketing informational sites and more product design. And just where I was working at the time, I got to do a little bit of startup product design, and I was hooked. I loved that, and I realized I was leaning away from doing the marketing sites. I've done it for like 8 years at that point, and I wasn't really interested. And so when I started freelancing, I was able to take on more of the product design projects when they came up, and I got to seek those out, and I got to say no to more of the marketing design. So in a way, like freelancing is a way that you can like bet on yourself and just kind of create the working environment that you want. Number 2, you get to work at the pace that you want. I've done years where I've worked really hard and I've taken on 3-4 projects at a time, and I have other years where I'm doing one project at a time. But now doing it for a while, I now work only about 10 months out of the year, and I take 2 months off. That's either as like long stretches where I'm going like backpacking in Nepal for a month and a half, or I'm just kind of breaking it up and doing like many things. And sometimes I'm not going anywhere at all. I'm just taking a hiatus and just taking a break to relax and to recharge and to be inspired again. And so that would be hard to do staying at a company unless you're constantly like quitting and joining another company. And it's hard to just like ask for, a couple of months off, but that's what I get to design, and I don't have to ask for permission for that. Let's see, what other opportunities? You have the opportunity of kind of what I'm attempting right now is breaking beyond freelancing and creating more products and services on your own. I've had the opportunity to partner with some people and create some things, and it's cool. And so you're able to flex down your work time freelancing in order to take on those opportunities as well. Yeah, I mean, I have other friends who have freelance who use that opportunity to travel and to work on the road and do kind of that remote digital nomad thing as well. I think that's number 4. Maybe that's number 5. Let's see if I can think of another one. Yeah. I mean, on the flip side of that, I'm a homebody. I like working from home. And so the opportunity was just to work from home when a lot of people were, when I started, everyone had to go into the office. And so I got to work from home and, pick how I work and what works best for me as an introvert. So there we go. Top 5 opportunities as a freelance designer. I hope that was okay. Just making it up on off the cuff. Cool. Yeah, keep the questions coming. So I had a great question recently was how do you do your own project management? And that's a really great question. Like you're in the middle of a project, how do you keep yourself on track? So I've done that over a lot of different ways. My process has evolved a lot. And where it's come down to now is I really just have 2 places. I work in Figma and I leave notes in Figma. So I've created like a frame that looks like a sticky note, and I have like created that as a component. And so what I will do is anytime I leave like a loose end or something like that needs to be designed, but I'm not doing it right now, whether I'm done for the day or, I'm done for the weekend, or I'm just like, it's figured out enough that I can go and work on something else. I leverage using these kind of like internal sticky notes a lot. And so I do that kind of as like to keep me on track of like when I pick this up, I can zoom out on the Figma file and I can look for sticky notes. And so that's one way that I keep on track of files on projects. The other thing is I'm a big believer in using the second brain method by Tego Forte. I've created a personal knowledge management system in Obsidian that I have been growing and evolving over time. And it's been such a game changer for me to just have one place where I know all of my knowledge, all the things that I want to save, all of my notes on things are all in one place. And so what I do in Obsidian is I use the second brain like project management, the PARA method that they teach you, and that's organizing your second brain as projects, areas of interest, resources, and then archives. And so I have projects up at the top, and that's where I keep my active projects. It's essentially just a markdown file, and that's where I take all of my notes for the projects that I have active. That's where I'm able to like create folders for a project. I'm able to stuff like all of the research that I've done, all of my meeting notes, everything that I need to keep track of for a project. And then the last thing is just my calendar. So I just use my calendar to kind of like block off either times that I need to focus or what I need to do to like meet with people, and meeting times for like regular check-ins with clients. And so that's my system for like staying on track of things. I found over time that I tried so hard to get tools that were like very complicated. And the problem that I kept running into is that I would overcomplicate the process and I would pick tools that were a lot of work for me to keep up as a solo freelancer. And so basically what I did for managing my projects as a freelancer was just as simple as like basically a text file and taking notes within my design file. And that's it. That was super easy to upkeep, super easy for me to stay on top of and keep track of. All right. Yeah, if you're joining me and you have any questions, feel free to let me know. I'm only hanging out for about 30 more minutes. Pretty short stream. Might not even work on my site today. I'm really enjoying just kind of hanging out and drinking some coffee. Pretty low energy today, so I apologize. But yeah, I'm just hanging out. Let's see. Let's see. Going back through like old files of like all the freelancing questions that I've gotten. Let's see. Oh, I had someone recently ask me, so if you go on designsmarts.co, my current site, that I'm going to be shutting down and merging with my personal site, joshmain.com, you could see that there's some productized services, meaning they are services that are kind of defined and bundled up as if they were products where you could put down your credit card and pay for it. And so I had some questions about that. And whether that's working for me, whether I recommend it, and if I recommend other designers doing it. And the short answer is, I don't think I would do it again. And the reason is that the nature of design as a service is that companies have a lot of unique problems. Every problem actually that I get, every contract that I get is pretty unique. And that if someone is interested in those services, they usually approach it in terms of, I saw that service, I want that, but different. And so I've only really gotten a handful of like people actually doing the service as it is. Everything else has just been something custom. So I don't think they're super valuable. I wouldn't do it again, at least not for UX design. I think it's a chicken or the egg kind of situation where if I did it again, it would have to be because I'm getting the exact same type of request over and over and over again. And I'm not really getting those. And so I think productized services can work, but I would wait until you start getting regular. If I was to do it personally, I would wait until I start getting like regular questions or the regular type of requests before I create a product around it, rather than creating a product and hoping to get people to buy into it. So I would say the other thing is, like, if you are going to do those types of services, you really have to market for the people who would be those kinds of buyers. And if you know anything about me, I don't do any type of marketing because that's just the way that I've designed my freelancing business. And so I've been fortunate enough that I don't have to do a heavy marketing machine where I have to regularly do posts or anything like that. I post when something's interesting to me, and like when I've done research on something and I think it would be interesting to other people. And so I think those productized services can work a little bit better if you're doing heavy marketing for people who I think could benefit from those services. But yeah, for me and the way that I freelance, I don't think I would do it again. Let's see. Someone asked me about subcontracting and whether I subcontract to junior designers. I do not. I've done all the work myself. And yeah, I haven't. I think it's interesting, and I think people have done, like, really benefited from it. And that's kind of the first step towards creating an agency. So if you're interested in that space and growing past being a freelancer, it's a really great way to go. That way you're not turning down projects and you're just managing someone who could do, a lot of the bulk of the work. But yeah, I haven't done it, so I couldn't tell you more about it. Let's see. I got another question about how do you handle billable work versus non-billable work? That's easy as well. I do flat rate for projects. I do not, I don't do, billable hours, and I don't give people an hourly rate. I think I'm very opposed towards hourly rates for multiple reasons. And one is the biggest thing is that it punishes me for getting better at my craft. So if I start out as a designer and it takes me 20 hours to design a feature, well, now as a more experienced designer, if it takes me 4 hours or it takes me 20 hours, but the quality is significantly higher, then there's a ceiling that I can charge for that. And especially if I get more efficient with my workflow, with how many great plugins there are, with Figma and great tools there are. When you leverage these tools, things like really minute, just kind of grunt work, just mindless work that you have to do, like to clean up your file or things like that, can be done in minutes rather than hours. And so all of those efficiencies, if I get really efficient with my work, I'm kind of punishing myself because there's a certain number, and I don't know exactly what it is, but there's a certain number where people start being like, whoa, that's a crazy hourly rate, and they're not really interested. And so rather than having that whole discussion and like justifying my work and how good I am and things like that, I just charge flat rate for a lot of my projects. Either flat rate or I bill my time in terms of like, you can own the minimum amount. It's not an hour, it's a week, or 2 weeks, which would be a sprint, or for a full month, 2 sprints. And so that's how I run my business. And so I don't have to worry about billable versus non-billable. And this is the beauty of freelancing, is that you get to make these decisions. You got to make it run it the way that you want to. And so I really wanted to take out all of the administrative work that I don't want to do. I want to take out all the boring work as much as possible. And so that's why I run my business the way that I do, where I get to have very low overhead, focus on the work as much as possible, and not worry about all of this minutia, like billing my hours and breaking them up and starting the clock and stopping it and all that stuff. I can focus on delivering great work. All right. Another question: How do you handle equity when working with early stage startups? That's a great question. I haven't successfully figured out a way to do that. And honestly, there hasn't been a lot of startups that I was truly interested in taking equity. I've tried negotiating equity with a couple of, or I think 3 different times, and we could just never land in a spot that it made sense. And especially now, it used to be that the early team would get, a decent amount of equity, and that equity has been shrinking and shrinking. And so, it stopped being like worth the negotiation and the back and forth and all of that stuff, to where I don't even deal with it anymore. I don't even try. I'm not really interested. I've had a lot of people want to partner and offer like, design it for free and all you get is equity, and that's a hard no from me. Got bills to pay. All right, last question. Yeah, no problem. I can answer as many questions as you want. Feel free to ask. But can you give me the best advice for freelancing? So I would say my best advice for freelancing as a designer is that designers are so flaky and bad at follow through and doing just managing themselves, that if you simply are able to tell a client what you're going to deliver and when, and then delivering it on time, you beat 80% of freelance designers out there. And that's how I know it sounds ridiculous, but like that's how low the bar is. And that I can't tell you how many times that I've gotten deals, I've gotten projects, I built relationships with companies because I'm able to be not even the fastest. And I'm definitely not the fastest, and I'm definitely not the best, but I've just made it a really strong point to make promises about deadlines and when I was going to get things done and when I'm going to deliver them, and then to deliver them on time. Because that's the biggest risk as a company, is that they make business decisions and they base things off of the time frame that you give them. So when you tell them a date and then you're late, or you miss it, or you ghost them, which happens a lot, then they lose money. And so if you're just able to communicate those things, then you're already ahead of the curve. The other part is just being, so that gets you beating 80%. You want to beat 90%, be enjoyable to work with. This is another big thing where I've met freelancers who are really, really good at their craft, but make it really difficult to work with them, either because they're very, they won't change their working process. They're very inflexible about how they do things and how they work. And so being flexible, being agreeable, and not treating your client like an enemy or someone that you're negotiating against, but rather someone that you're trying to partner with in order to come to a solution, is the best way to go about it. So having a degree of flexibility that you can only really have as a freelancer compared to companies, and being just really enjoyable to work with, and kind of focusing on that UX of working with you is one way to think about it. So yeah, if you do what you say you're going to do on time, and then you're actually pleasant to work with, then you will create a UX, or you'll create a freelancing business just off of referrals, the way that I have. This is such an underrated skill. Just the communicating, or just delivering things on time? Being flexible for your client. Yeah, that's another reason why I'm not too keen on productized services, is that you're making your services more rigid, which is I've often talked about your rules as that companies have to go by, and rules that you can go by as an individual. And there's so many things that I think people get tripped up when they start freelancing, is they start thinking of themselves as a business, and realizing that businesses have to work with some restrictions. So things like businesses have to spend a lot of time creating a visual brand and some kind of identity, where you as an individual, you have an identity. It's you have visuals. It's your face. And so, you don't have to create a brand personality. It's your personality. And so when you're trying to almost creating more work for yourself by creating a brand and trying to play by company rules, and it's actually more difficult. And so this goes along that same kind of thought process where you get to be a lot more nimble and flexible working with your clients, where companies aren't able to move as quickly. And so taking that as a skill set and thinking about that as something that you can leverage really makes it more powerful and makes it where you now are competing against companies as a freelancer, because your strengths are things like your flexibility and your willingness to adapt and to change. And that really makes you a strong contender. Yeah, no problem. I hope that was helpful. Thanks for hanging out. Oh, that's a great question. Okay. What is at least one thing you know after freelancing for a while that you wish you would have known or realized when you were first starting as a professional freelancer? Okay, so this is a great question because the first time that I went freelancing, or I started full time freelancing, I went broke. And a lot of it was I simply didn't know how to, I didn't know what the process looked like from a client perspective. I had never worked at an agency. I had never worked with any kind of company that like did client facing work. And so I had no idea about things like project management or managing client expectations or collaboration or just like how to kind of advocate for myself. And so I was looking for work in all the wrong places. I actually like way back in the day, like I was looking for work 12 years ago, or no, 14 years ago. I was looking on Craigslist, um, and and looking for like job boards, which were all the wrong places. So yeah, I went broke. Couldn't couldn't pay my rent, and I had to go and find a job. Um, so yeah, I wish I had known more about just like what that flow looked like. I wish I had worked with an agency, or at least had like a better understanding of all of the different parts that are not design, so that I could manage myself better. Um, Things that I wish I had known. I spent too much time sweating around things like how do I write, like do I need to form an LLC, like how well do I write my contracts. And while those things are both important and like are really helpful, and things that you should do eventually, they're not necessarily to start, especially if you're doing it as like a side gig. That there's plenty of places where you can find a contracting template or a contract template. There's great resources like the Freelancers Union that give a great template for contracts and things like that. And you could just take those and you can make the adaptations that you need and be able to start with that. So yeah, I got held up too much in the minutia of like all the little things besides like the only thing that really mattered was like just finding that first client, and the rest of it just kind of came together. How's that answer? I'm trying to think of what other mistakes because I made so many. I wish I had swapped from hourly earlier. That held me back, I think. Um, I wish I had systematized more work early on. There's so much that we do in design that I think we can leverage being able to create components or systems or frameworks earlier, I was doing too many things just like off the cuff, ad hoc all the time, and I was like wasting a lot of time. It it took me an embarrassingly long time to take my contract and make it into a template that I would copy, because what I would do is I had my contract template, even after the point where I actually had a lawyer look it over and make edits, and then I had a good template. Even then I resisted templatizing it, and I would just I took it and I applied it to the first to the first client, and then I would make a copy off of that, and I would go through and make sure that I removed previous client's name and add the next client's name, and I'd change things. And man, I wasted so much time by just not templatizing that stuff. And it was always the stuff that it wasn't even the core of the value that I did. It was all the non-billable work. And so I wish I had gone better at systematizing and offloading that stuff, so I didn't have to spend so much time and effort thinking about it. Can't tell you how many times that I've written a statement of work or a contract at 2 a.m. because I had to get it out, but I didn't leverage any of my systems or tools. And so, yeah, I wasted a lot of time doing that. That's a great question. Building on that, how should a new freelancer approach managing multiple projects or clients? That's a great question. I like to use the analogy of spinning plates. I actually got this from my my friend Brian Burkett, who's a freelance dev, or front end dev freelancer. And so when you're balancing multiple clients, it really is what I was talking about, over communicating. And that rule of thumb, you shouldn't go more than 3 days without touching base with a client. So if you have multiple clients, you should think about where that next touch point is, because you're trying to keep those plates spinning. And so if you leave one plate alone for too long, then it's going to fall. And so I made this mistake, and I took on too many clients at once, and I went a full week and a half without a client not hearing from me. And by the time that they emailed me, they were upset, and the relationship was just irreparable. It was just trying to get the project wrapped up as quickly as possible. And so, yeah, I would say just that heuristic of just touch base with a client, minimum 3 days, not including weekends, or including weekends, actually. If you touch base on Friday, then you should be touching base Tuesday morning at the latest. Because remember, you're fighting against the stigma of freelancers being flaky. And so if you are regularly communicating, you're able to put their mind at ease. The worst thing they can do is imagine that you've ghosted them, or you forgot about the project, or you're just not communicating. And so, making sure that you're touching base, even if it's communicating, and this is something that a lot of freelancers make a mistake on, is only communicating when they have updates. Communicate even when there's no updates. Even if it's, I'm still working on this, or I don't have anything yet to show, but just so you know, I'm working on this. Here's a couple of maybe you fill it in with some open questions, or some kind of things that you're working on. But communicate even if you don't have updates. It's more important to just say, hey, checking in, still working on this, rather than to say nothing at all. And it necessarily now with a lot of teams having Slack and inviting people into Slack, sometimes it's just being active in the Slack channel and like weighing on some of those things. I know they take away from like deep focus time, and it really depends on kind of your working style. But that's also kind of a good way to like make sure that like they feel like you're active and working on it and alive and breathing, and you're not ghosting them. What's an elegant way to turn down a project when you're just either fully booked or uninterested in the project itself? Yeah, so I've been doing that a lot just because I've been taking longer term projects where they're like minimum 3 months long, but like 6 months to, I had like a 9 month project. So I am turning down stuff. And so, um, I like to pay it forward. I like to refer other people, other freelancers that I've met and that I've worked with and that I know would be a good fit for it. And so I like to spread around the love because I'm comfortable with the amount of work that I'm doing. And so I like to pass along those clients. Um, when it's a project that I'm not really interested in, um, it's as simple as just saying that, this doesn't seem like a great fit for me, which makes it even easier to send it out to other people because I really like to have like a good kind of roster of people that I could send work to, especially if they don't do the same type of work that I do or the same types of projects, because then I could like full like send it to them and then everyone's happy because, you know, I'm never going to be interested in that project anyway. If I don't have anyone or if it just doesn't seem like a good fit, then I'd be like, this seems like a really great project. But this just doesn't seem like a fit for me. And it's as simple as that. Like some people are just kind of afraid to say no in a polite way, but it's better than kind of wasting their time, wasting your time. I've had plenty of those and people appreciate it. I think if you could try to help them out in any way you can. Sometimes I don't have someone I can refer them to, but sometimes I'll just send them like, I would look in these areas. I would look for these things, like your verbiage on how you communicated it wasn't the clearest. I would look for this. Sometimes what they needed wasn't a designer. It was like a front end developer or a marketer or like a conversion optimization person, something like that, or even like a copywriter. And so I'll say like, you're actually looking for this and you should look for them in these places. Like I said earlier, the projects that I turn down are the ones who are like, hey, I have this startup. You'll work 100% for equity, right? That sounds great, but not really interested at this time. Thanks. Now I will say, if I have a project like come through and they're interested in starting right now, but I currently have a project, then I will try to work together to find a time that I can start it, where we can have some degree of overlap. So I'll either say I'm not available to start right now, but I'm able to start in 2 months. So if you're not in a super rush, I would love to start around then. That would be really great because I'm ending this project and I could start on yours. And if sometimes that will be kind of the end of the conversation. They're like, no, I want to start right now. Then I will note it down and I will go and follow up with them once my project ends or is like starting to wrap up and be like, hey, just checking in. Did you happen to find anyone for your project? I have some availability still coming up. And so sometimes they'll be like, yeah, I actually like couldn't find anyone, or like someone fell through, flaky freelancers. No, we already have someone, and then cool, no worries. Um, and then sometimes it's like if the gap is even like wider than that, like I won't wrap up my project for 3 months, and they want to start now. They're like, okay, are what about like a month and a half? and I have like a kind of slow ramp up where I'm starting like really digesting and understanding some things, and I'm working maybe roughly 10 hours. Again, not tracking my time, but I kind of give them ballparks, like 10 to 15 is what I can start committing about a month from now. And then I can like ramp up as this project is ramping down, because projects kind of naturally have that ramp up and ramp down. And so that's one way that I can do it. It's like, what's a way that we can kind of overlap these? And sometimes that works as well. And that's like a good way to like show that you're like trying to be flexible, make it work, if you can. And sometimes it's just like, all right, it's going to suck for a little bit. I'm full time on that project, and now I'm going to work like another 20 hours on this one. And I just know that like, there's going to be like an overlap kind of suckiness, as one project's ramping down, one project's ramping up. But I know that's temporary, and it's nice when it hits your bank account. So, but that's based off of your energy level. Now I'm like less likely to do it as I'm old and crotchety. But yeah, that's just something I would do. Be like, all right, there's going to be like temporary suckiness as I'm overlapping projects, and then we'll see. And then as one ramps down, it'll be a lot nicer. And I think I'm at an hour. Yeah. I think I'm about wrapping up. I think I have time for like one more question if anyone has a question. Definitely gonna have to do timestamps for these just because I've had so many amazing questions. Yeah, thanks for hanging out. Are you still freelancing, Scott? Not anymore. Nice. I knew someone would scoop you up. All righty. Well, I have some family visiting, so I'm going to go hang out and enjoy my weekend, starting it early, because that's what I can do, freelancing. Thanks for everyone who hung out. I hope you have a great rest of your day, a great weekend, and I will catch you on the next one. Feel free to hit me up on Twitter if you have any questions, outside of the stream times, and I'll note them down and I will answer them during the stream. Check out my my upcoming course on breaking into freelancing, where you get to have full access to me and ask me a ton of other questions about freelancing. Till the next one,